I kind of come from a background that was quite hostile towards Islam. It was a very Islamophobic background. So Islam was the last thing to be looked at. And it was only until I had a Muslim friend who, they didn't give me da'wah. They had zero interest in giving me da'wah, in the sense of they didn't think I'd be receptive to it because of that background. But they just said to me once, why don't you read the Quran? Right? You've looked into all these religions. Why don't you read the Quran? And I was like, why not? I mean, at this point, I'd looked into multiple different religions and cultures, looked into kind of like Zen Buddhism and all of these. I looked into everything at this point and thought, why not? I'll give this a go. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Ibrahim, or my birth name is Reese Byfield, and I converted to Islam when I was 17, and now alhamdulillah 12 years later, and I've gone on my journey. So before I converted to Islam, I suppose it makes sense to kind of give a backdrop of my family household. So my mum is a English lady. She comes from a Christian background, though she herself isn't practicing, and I wouldn't say actually kind of believes in that. She's more of a agnostic type. She believes in something, but she's not a member of an organized religion. As for my father, he comes from a Punjabi background, so I'm mixed race. He comes from a Sikh Punjabi background, and he, as well as he himself, he's not practicing, and is probably kind of switches between being an atheist and an agnostic, somewhere between that. So my kind of background was a sort of very much a liberalism focused household, with a variety of cultural influences and religious experiences, even though those weren't pushed on me or even embraced by me. So just with that background, the idea of God was always there, though I didn't necessarily follow a particular religion. And when I was about 15, I started looking into religions, and kind of just went across the different kind of journeys about looking into different religions and things like that. But in a nutshell, I always had a general sense of God, but wasn't a member of a religion. So what kind of led me towards Islam was my search for different religions. I kind of looked into a bit of everything. Like my first point was, I kind of thought, I'll look at into kind of the oldest religions. I'll look into the Egyptian belief system. I looked into Hinduism. I looked into Judaism, and I also flirted with atheism for a while, which is kind of during the peak of Stephen Hawking. I watched like a 3-hour YouTube lecture of his that he did about the beginning of the universe, and he went through a long process of describing how the universe came. And when he got to the beginning of how the universe started, his only answer was, it came from nothing. And when he said that, I had been watching it for 2 hours and 50 minutes at this point, and I was like, no, he should be saying God. Like, that was kind of the conclusion. So it was kind of Stephen Hawking's contributed towards my theism quite strongly. As for Islam itself, I kind of come from a background that was quite hostile towards Islam. It was a very Islamophobic background. So Islam was the last thing to be looked at. And it was only until I had a Muslim friend who, they didn't give me da'wah. They had zero interest in giving me da'wah, in the sense of they didn't think I'd be receptive to it because of that background. But they just said to me once, why don't you read the Quran? Right? You've looked into all these religions. Why don't you read the Quran? And I was like, why not? I mean, at this point, I'd looked into multiple different religions and cultures, looked into kind of like Zen Buddhism and all of these. I looked into everything at this point and thought, why not? I'll give this a go. And I remember reading the Quran, first started from Surah Fatiha. And I read Surah Fatiha, and my impression of it probably is not going to be well received. But I just read it and thought, this is the same as any other kind of holy book. There's a guy, God, and he's asserting his authority over everyone. And for me, I was just like, this is what's the difference between this and the other religions? However, when I started reading the Quran, and I read it every day, and what I found is I started really building an attachment with it. Its simplicity, its style, the way it got to the point. They didn't have me reading facts about this is the son and so and all of this, and telling me about 5 generations before getting to the point. It just got to the point, and its message was clear, and the morals of the story and the message and the laws that were being discussed were so clear and were just pure common sense. And it was this commonsensical nature of what Allah, God Most High, was telling us to do that really appealed to me. The fact that it just made pure sense. And it was like, this is what we should be doing anyway. And that's what really drew me in. So in essence, it was the Quran that was the major influence for me becoming a Muslim. The events that kind of led up to my Shahada were, after I'd read the Quran, I essentially believed in Islam. But I wasn't ready to kind of convert. There were many things at that time in my life. I was a young 17-year-old boy doing the things that 17-year-old boys do. I wasn't really interested in not doing those things and stopping those things. However, one day I was kind of just watching, different YouTube videos and stuff like that. And I watched a series about the Day of Judgment. And to be honest, it was a bit of a conspiracy theory series, but I wasn't really swayed by the conspiracy theory stuff. I was more interested in the Day of Judgment. And because whilst I'm reading the Quran, I'm hearing about it, but I'm not kind of being given a full from start to finish picture, and then the signs of the Day of Judgment, because I didn't really engage with hadith. I kind of stuck with just reading the Quran. And at this time period, I didn't really know. I knew that hadith were reports about the Prophet Muhammad, his sayings and things like that, but I didn't really go into it. So when I saw this series about the Day of Judgment, it really put fear in my heart. And I called my friend and said, I need to become Muslim now. Now, I don't want to die and not be Muslim. And he's like, just call me tomorrow. I'm like, no, now. And then he's like, cool, have a shower. We're going to my uncle's house. And then his uncle was there, my friend was there, and his 2 aunties were there. And funny enough, I don't know why, but this guy, I was there in front of him, but he also had a Skype call with some of his friends listening in. So I done my Shahada with his aunties, my friend, his uncle, and some people from Somalia on Skype. I took my Shahada just after my 17th birthday, which was in October, and which basically gives me a full year before Ramadan comes. So I went through the process of learning how to pray and having some time to kind of build up to Ramadan. But I didn't really know much about it other than, you fast. So when Ramadan came along, it was quite difficult. Not because I didn't know about fasting and prayer. I'd had, a year to kind of learn these things. But it was difficult because my parents didn't know I was Muslim. I didn't know how they were going to take it, so I kept it a secret from them for that year. And it stayed a secret for roughly 2 years. Anyway, in this first Ramadan, I didn't really know what to do because I just finished my first year of college. I didn't have a job. I couldn't buy any food for myself because I didn't really have any money, and there was just no halal food in the house. And also it was difficult because they'd be cooking haram food for me, and I couldn't eat it. I had to just pretend to eat it and chuck it away. And it wasn't so difficult in terms of prayer because I used to be out all the time anyway, so I just went to the mosque and stayed there until Isha and came home. But the food was a problem. So I didn't know what to do. And besides, when I went to the masjid for Maghrib and ate some dates and crisps or whatever was there, I didn't have anything to eat. And it's actually quite embarrassing how someone found out, right? So what happened was, there was a person who was like, you know, why are you always going to do wudu so much? Yeah, like, why are you going? I'm like, oh, you know, why don't you just go to the toilet and think? Because I was praying Taraweeh and like going to do wudu like every other like second unit, right? And they're like, why don't you just go toilet? Then you wouldn't have the problem. I'm like basically, and obviously this brother's really pressing me, so I'm like, basically, I can't go to the toilet because I'm not eating, and I don't have anything to go toilet with, right? And then he's like, what do you mean you're not eating? I was like, I don't have any halal food. And this brother who was involved in the masjid, he owned a restaurant that was next door to the masjid, and he was like, come to the masjid to eat, yeah. And so I started eating there every now and then. Now, during this process, I had a very close friend who wasn't a very practicing Muslim at the time, who went to my secondary school. And he came to know that I'd become Muslim. So he got in contact with me and started speaking. And naturally, Ramadan is an incredibly lonely time for converts because they don't have anyone around them. And especially in my situation, because I didn't really know many Muslims at the time. However, this brother got in contact with me and, you know, we started meeting up, and then he was like, why don't you just come have your iftar and suhoor at my house? So in fact, why don't you just stay over at my house for the whole month, right? And then every Ramadan after that, I basically stayed over at his house. And his home became like my second home. And yeah, so that's how Ramadan went for me. So my most distinct memory from Ramadan is quite an embarrassing one. And it involves our beloved channel, Islam Channel. So it was my first or second fast, right? And I had never fasted. This is my first Ramadan. I'd never fasted a day in my life. I'd never not eaten breakfast and never not drank water, right? So I was really tired, and I had a really busy day because we played football in the morning, we did this, we did that. I was dying at the end of the day. I was like looking at the time, counting the minutes, and I was really tired. So I just fell asleep and took a nap. And I took a nap next to the TV. Next thing you know, I just hear the adhan booming in my ear. So I jumped up, grabbed the water, chucked it down my throat, ate the dates. And then my friend's brother comes in and goes, no, that's just an advert. And I'm like, no. So yeah, I have to say that is my most comical and distinct memory of Ramadan. My advice for a new Muslim coming to Ramadan would be that you need to get out there. You need to, you know, obviously there is an obligation on people to support you, but you can't be in your bubble. You have to get out there. It's your job as well to connect with people. So connect with people, discuss things, see if there's any friends that you have that are Muslim, connect with them. Also, pace yourself. It's a long journey. It takes a long time to get settled into the religion, to build yourself up, to build your iman up, and also to cleanse yourself of past habits and behaviors. So take things slow. Just focus on your fast, and that's it. Don't worry about all of the additional things that are taking place in Ramadan. Focus on your fast. Focus on developing a relationship with Allah, fasting and dua. And then for future years, you can add things in, inshallah. For those that are born Muslim, we have to see that it is a real obligation to take care of converts. Alhamdulillah, in my case, I was really lucky to come across some born Muslims that took care of me and guided me. But think about it. Imagine, I'm going through a time period where my family don't know. I'm keeping this secret. I'm going to whole new levels of secrecy. And I don't have any food to eat. There's nothing I can eat. If I was to eat at home, maybe... and my household was one that didn't really buy snacks either. So there was no crisps or anything laying around. I would have just been breaking my fast with water, and maybe I might get lucky and get a chocolate bar. So Imagine you could just open your home. Or you don't even need to do that. You can just, if you know there's a convert, just take them out for a meal. Take them under your wing. Make sure they're okay. Be a shoulder for them.